Happy New Year's Eve, snow revelers. This is Scott Savage with the Sawtooth Avalanche Center with your weekend update for New Year's Eve 2021. So the goal of these weekend updates is not to replace the daily avalanche forecast. So please check that out at 7:30 each morning to get the freshest and most precise and detailed information that you can. This is just going to be a broad brush overview of what happened this past week, what's going on right now, and what to expect for the weekend and into early next week. So brief recap. For any of you that have been here, you know all about it. We had a big storm, second big one of the year, that lasted through roughly Monday. It was winding down. And if you look at the dark blue in the lower left-hand part of the screen there, that's showing over 150% of the normal amount of water in the snowpack. So how big the snowpack is for this time of year. The soldiers are roughly the same, around 150% too. So that's a huge amount of water that we just got, and in the form of snowfall. Woohoo! And the interesting part thing is that if you looked at this same graph back on December 10th, it would show near zero. So we've gone from basically 0% or no snow to 150% of normal in about 20 days. Then the rest of the week, some cool weather with light snowfall in general and moderate winds. They did kick up a little bit today, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So the danger in general has been a slowly decreasing trend, going from high danger throughout the zones to considerable. This is looking at the Galena Summit area, and it's one of the higher danger ratings for our zones. If you look up to the north and Banner Summit, it's already moderate, but you see that nice trend going from more dangerous or high to considerable and then down to moderate. And this is a new feature that we have on the website this year. We have these visualization tools. So if you're in the observations looking through that, you can either view a list view, a visualization tools view, which gives you some nice charts and graphs, or a map view. What this shows is in the observations, how many of them each day, and you can pick any time frame you want, but that's this past week. So how many observations are showing either avalanches or cracking or collapsing? So obvious signs of instability. And you see a nice decrease there. Not a huge sample size, but it is meaningful for sure. That's a good thing. So presently, again, Galena Summit and Eastern Mountain Zone, it's considerable, moderate for the danger. That's at upper elevation and middle elevation, considerable. And outlook is for it to decrease a little bit tomorrow. We'll see what Chris comes up with tomorrow morning. So this is in homage to a hero of mine, a English mathematician named John Venn. Everyone remember their Venn diagrams? And a little known fact, he invented the Venn diagram when he was 26 years old. So a lot going on with that guy at a young age. So in the little graphic I have here, if you picture all avalanche terrain, so all slopes are inside the blue square. And then the gray circle is the slopes that have that old, weak, faceted October snow. So it's the shadier slopes at middle and upper elevations. And at upper elevations, it's also some of the sunnier slopes as well. So that's in the gray circle. And then in the blue circle down below is wind-loaded slopes, which are also tend to be higher, upper elevation for sure, and then some exposed middle elevation terrain. So either where you have that old October snow or where you have wind loading, so fresh wind slabs and drifts, you need to pay extra attention, use extra caution in those areas. And then the big take-home point is that red danger in the middle, where you have those two subsets where they intersect. So where you have both wind-loaded terrain or wind-loaded slopes and slopes that have that old October snow. Those are the areas where you're by far the most likely to trigger an avalanche. Have been this past week and will be this weekend. So the avalanche activity we've seen has been mostly confined to upper elevation and shady middle elevation terrain, which fits that slopes with old October snow, and mostly in wind loaded or wind affected terrain. And most of it has been where you have both of those. We have seen a little bit of avalanche activity in places that it appears to be running on a layer in the middle of the snowpack, possibly between the mid-December storm and the Christmas storm. It's hard to say because we haven't been on the ground to look at that, but that's definitely a secondary concern to those bigger avalanches that are failing on the old October snow near the bottom of the snowpack. And most of the avalanches we've seen have been roughly D2 sized, which is big enough to bury people. Some photos, and thanks a ton to our partners, Sun Valley Heliski. They give us some amazing observations and cover a ton of ground, obviously being in the ship. But this is a great example of that intersection where you have wind-loaded terrain at a ridgeline where old snow existed. So those are the places where it's most likely to have avalanche activity and continued instabilities. This was taken on December 28th. They had a brief window here earlier this week where they were able to fly. And this slope is right at the border between middle elevation and upper elevation out in the western Smoky Mountains. Here's an interesting photo they took that shows those slopes that aren't necessarily wind loaded, especially if you look in the lower left-hand part of that photo, that little pocket, that avalanche that failed, is well down off the ridge line. You can see the obvious signs of wind loading right at the ridge, and some avalanches failing there where it is wind loaded. But this one, the wind probably just stiffened it a little bit. It may have sifted it in there, but it's not a huge, like, in your face snowdrift. So that's what can happen still potentially in areas where that old October snow exists at the bottom of the snowpack. So what do we have going now? Well, unfortunately, we can't forget about something like this. We have just been seeing smaller avalanches, but there's still a chance you can trigger a big beast like this, where that old snow is connected across, big alpine cirques, like up in Bowles. There's a lot of snow on that at this point, 4 to 6 or 7 feet. It's getting deeper and harder to trigger, but it's still possible. So the weekend weather forecast, it's going to be cold, mostly clear tomorrow and a little bit more clouds on Sunday. No snowfall in the forecast, and probably moderate winds. So there's a ton of snow that is still available for transport that can be blown over ridges. And you're probably seeing them too if you're out there today, seeing snow plumes, especially in the southern Wood River Valley from about Ketchum south. So I'd expect to see some both signs of the recent wind loading that's going on Thursday night, Friday, and Friday night. That's New Year's Eve. And also while you're out there, you may see some additional active wind loading, and those V slopes to obviously avoid. The danger and problems for the weekend. So it'll be basically increasing as you go up in elevation. So from low danger to moderate danger and possibly considerable in some zones. We'll have to check and see the forecast both Saturday and Sunday. But the big trend is that as you go higher, it gets more dangerous. That's because you have more wind, more old snow, and just more exposed terrain. So over time, Saturday through Sunday, we should also see that steady kind of decrease in hazard. That's assuming it doesn't get really windy. So if the winds stay similar or decrease a little bit, then things will just ever so slightly get better, or they'll kind of stay steady if the wind does keep blowing as far as how much hazard there is out there. So I think I've hit that enough. It's most dangerous at upper elevations, and why. The problems that we're going to be faced with, the avalanche problems, are persistent slab or deep persistent slab. The difference is in how deep it is, not a very complicated thing based on the name, right? So persistent slabs tend to be less than a meter or less than about 3 feet, where it's easier to trigger them for snowmobilers and skiers. Deep persistent slabs, those are those big monsters that are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet thick, the slabs. And to trigger those, usually you need to find a thinner spot or a place where it's a little bit weaker. So it tends to be harder to trigger, but they can break way above you, way to the side, and they tend to be unsurvivable. Fortunately, the chances of them are lower than having the persistent slabs, but it's really ugly if you do get caught in one. And then wind slab avalanches are the other problem we'll be worrying about, predominantly at upper elevation, but also any exposed ridge lines, especially in the southern zone at middle, and even potentially a few isolated places at lower elevations. So to find more stable riding or skiing, places where the snow surface is soft, that means there hasn't been any recent wind. Typically lower elevations or sunny middle elevation terrain, you're not going to find any of that old October snow. So those are places where you're generally going to have better stability. And you need to evaluate every slope on your own. I'm not saying every slope is stable anywhere, but the trend is to find better conditions there as far as less avalanche danger. So then on Monday, we start the next storm. Looks like a good one from a few days away. The upper graph is at Titus, so right around Galena Summit, and it's showing about 20 inches by Wednesday morning, kind of 18 to 24 if you look at the red line and the dark blue solid line. Those are the averages of a bunch of different models. Who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be 30 or 40 inches up there. And then the lower graph there, the real wide one, is looking at the Vienna area, so just west of Smiley Creek, and that's showing by midnight Tuesday 21 inches of new snow. So definitely going to get some snow Monday, Tuesday, and then continuing through the rest of next week. So next week, expect a spike in the danger to considerable, possibly high by Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll be facing the same problems, persistent and deep persistent, and wind slabs. You may see storm slabs pop up on there. Remains to be seen whether it's the kind of storm that's forming snow on in the absence of wind, or forming slabs, excuse me, in the absence of wind. So a few general reminders. Check the forecast each day at 7:30 a.m. You can sign up to have it emailed to you and pop up in your inbox. To do that, at the bottom of every page on the website, you'll see that enter email address. So you just pop it in there and you're in business. We'll email you the forecast each morning. Also, observations. Thank you so much for all the observations everyone has already sent in this year. It really helps us with create both more accurate and precise products. It's a huge benefit to be able to know what everyone's seeing out there, whether it's stable or unstable. Either one, they're all pieces of information. So you can text us on that previous page. On the left-hand side, it gives you all the different ways you can submit observations, but you can text us. You can email us at info@sawtoothavalanche.com. On social media, sawtoothavi is the handle, or fill out the observation form. Again, there are all the different ways on the bottom of every page on the website. And most importantly, pay attention and have fun out there. Happy New Year's Eve and Happy New Year to all.